Yeah, so have like they mentioned, I have an extreme heart for just relating to people, reaching out to people, especially people transitioning from other countries, coming here and living in the United States. We've just seen so much in our area, and I've just been blessed to be involved in those communities and just to kind of help them with the daily life. And so, but another area I'm very focused in, super missions minded, is how do we get this next generation, the young people that are like myself or a little bit younger, how do we equip them and how do we inspire them to be passionate about missions and to kind of be the next generation of the church and of the mission field and of Christ followers. And so that's something that has been laid on my heart, and so I'm here to talk to you about that today. And so I think obviously we all have just worries about the next generation, our children, and you mentioned we see things on the news through different lenses and of how people are growing up and what young people are going through. And so it is true that I think my generation is probably one of the most dependent on electronics, on our phones, always have our earbuds in, probably playing music too loud. My generation's also been struggling, just record high numbers of anxiety, depression. They're kind of breaking away from the family units, becoming more independent, isolated. And so all of that is true, and also something that has to be looked at and thought about. But Gen Z, I guess, that's what they're calling us these days. So one of a generational psychologist had been quoted saying this about Generation Z. He said, Earth's largest age group, so if you wonder what the age group is, because I had to look it up, it's 10 to 25. So the Earth's largest age group, 10 to 25, is a generation of progressive, open-minded young individuals who have strong values, beliefs, and attitudes looking to make a lasting difference. And so even though they have those kind of a little bit of baggage with them, and every generation has their problems and their hang-ups, what an amazing encouragement to hear about that generation. And it's just like, we would love to see that in our church. We'd love to see that on the mission field, and we would love to see that being brought out of these young people. What we wouldn't give to see open-minded people with strong values, with strong beliefs, with attitudes that want to see lasting change, that want to see lasting difference. And how can we just adjust their mindsets and just get them in the mentality of seeing lasting change in the kingdom rather than just lasting change in general. So many people are passionate about global warming or just different social and human activist movements. But could we channel that passion and those strong beliefs for the church and for expanding the kingdom? And so I really do think we can, and I'm so encouraged. I know that you guys are probably seeing flashes of just amazing youth being inspired to kind of step up and step out. I know that even in the short time I've been here, the amazing band of youth and just even some of the presenters that have shared have just kind of even shown that. And so I'm so glad that that's alive and well in Canada. Just some examples that I've seen back in my home is I'm currently enrolled in a biblical perspectives course, which is pretty academic, pretty intensive. So it's a 15-week course. It's 3 hours long, 1 day a week. It also requires about 4 hours of reading each week. Pretty intensive. It's like, man, I thought I was out of school. Now I got more homework to do. And so it's amazing. But there's actually probably around 50 young people signed up for this course that are committed to going to it weekly and just committed to growing and just seeing what God has for his plans biblically and just for around the world and for the nations. And so that's just so encouraging to me. And so this is kind of funny. I think when I see people present, people speak at conferences or just even sermons or something like that, I feel like they always have kind of words or, maybe it's alliteration, maybe it rhymes or something like that, but something to remember their points. So I was like, I really need to think of something like that for like my presentation. I was like, something that's gonna stick in their minds. So I was thinking of what are my ins, like my insights into youth. And so I thought of 3 words that have in the front of them. And so we'll be moving through those and kind of just working through just how I've seen those play out in my own life, and just how we can practically apply that to encouraging the youth that God has given us in our lives. And so the first one I have is inspire. How do we inspire youth? How do we set that fire in them? How do we just give them a heart for nations? How do we give them a heart for people? How do we give them a heart for the Bible, a heart for the church? So how do we inspire the youth around us? The second one I thought of is invest. So how do we invest in those, into their ministries, into their the things that they're passionate about? How do we give them responsibilities within the church? And what is too much, what is too little responsibility, and just what does that look like? And then finally is how do we then instill that in their daily life? They've been inspired, they've had the training, the investment, but how do we then promote them to kind of step out on their own and be independent? That's another IN if you want to add that one, but I don't know. So how do they kind of form their own ministries and kind of step out and be just self-sufficient? And so those are the 3 ins that I have, and just the insights that God has given me. Inspire, invest, and instill. And I'd also just like to preface that I wouldn't consider myself like the foremost expert on how to inspire and empower youth in the next generation. But I think just I can speak from experience and just how people have inspired and invested me. And so I'd love to share that. And also just, if you came here to see me speak, you'll probably be pretty disappointed, but I hope God can speak through me, and then maybe you'll learn something. Those are my two prayers and kind of and things to think about. So let's start with inspire. And so thank you to Peter sharing this morning. I love sharing kind of after other presenters have shared, and I can just be like, wow, oh man, that's crazy. I'm learning stuff here as I'm going to present, and just how it connects is so beautiful. And so I think something that's very important when thinking about inspiring youth is that we're inspiring them to see the heart of God. Like, we're not inspiring them to see change in in people or this and that, but really it's down to the heart of the Father. And really, people aren't going to have that fire within them if they don't first understand just how the Father has loved them and the Father's heart for other people. And so I think putting all of these things, all of these points that I have through that lens of how can all of these things then be relayed to give the glory to God is so important. And then also thank you to Mitch and Heather, and just kind of really going to my next point of just, today's generation are really looking for something to hold on to, and something almost physical in a sense. And so I think what they had touched on really kind of relates to my next point, which is I think we need to give more opportunity to learn through real life examples. That is when I know that I have learned the most. There's so many statistics and studies out there about how children and even adults and just everybody kind of learns better when you have an experience, when you have hands-on learning and activity. And so some examples from my life is I had done a discipleship school in Costa Rica, and I think just the 3 months that I had been there, just being immersed in the culture and just hearing them speak Spanish every day, I think I learned way more Spanish there than I did in 3 years of learning it in high school. And I'm sorry, Senora Samet, if you're watching this somehow. It's just true. It's nothing against you. It's just, that's a better way to learn. Another thing is like just, yeah, I think I learned way more about the brain, how it functions, about the body when I got a major concussion than I did from anatomy class. And this last one, I think I've learned way more in driving stick, driving manual cars. It's a funny story. So my mom had gotten foot surgery, and so it was on her, well, I guess in manual you have to use both feet, but I don't remember which foot it was. But she wasn't able to drive the car, and she had to go to the doctor for some reason. There was nobody else home, and at this point I had been learning manual car just in the parking lot, and I would probably stall it probably every 30 seconds, something like that. And so I was like, and so she's looking around and she's like, Nolan, you have to take me to the doctors. And I was like, oh no. And so I learned way more in that experience, driving on the road with other cars coming at me and rolling through stop signs and not stopping because I was worried about stalling. I learned way more and grew so much more in how to drive and even just a love for driving manual and a funny story than I did ever in the learning in those parking lots. And yeah, I learned so much more about God's voice and how he speaks to us intimately in a winter retreat when they just said, hey, we're going to have time where we're going to play music and you go off and you just talk to the Father. And so I learned way more through that and just heard God speak to me in miraculous ways than I ever would have listening to the speaker talk for 3 hours on this is how you hear God's voice. And so it's just something that we need personally in our lives that really just changes us. And lastly, I'm sorry, I believe that our youth will learn more about missions from experiencing missions in their home and abroad and everywhere by experiencing it, by doing it, by having opportunities to serve rather than coming to a conference and hearing people like myself and others speak. And so that's a funny thing to say at a conference where I'm trying to give you advice is saying don't do anything. But stick around. We still need you. We are still in Inspire. We haven't even got to invest yet. Yeah, and so I think there's a statistic that said just 50 people that have had ministry experience or missions experience were 50% more likely to be interested in future ministry experience. And so I think that's just amazing. Just when we give people opportunity, they're way more likely to then step out and want more opportunities like that. And so it's just an experience thing. And so I think, we've even seen that our youth group at home, they host a evangelistic missions training called EMT, and it's just amazing to see youth. They have a week of discipleship, and then they have a week where they are on the streets and just sharing their testimonies, being empowered, and just the ways that we've seen God work in that has been incredible, and just so many baptisms and just testimonies from those stories. And so you don't have to go far. You can do it at home, you can do it in a local city, or just, even inside your own church. And so, because it's lifelong learning is what we're looking for. Now, I was, like I said, I had been a student of Spanish and not of Greek, but the Greek word for disciple, mathetes, I think. It's probably not that great. But that's the Greek word for disciple, and really the core of it is to be a learner, is to just be a lifelong learner. And so that's what we have been called to do. And so in Matthew 11:29, it says, Jesus is saying, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And so, so his yoke, just the things, the things that you bear, God's heart, let's really dawn that on ourselves and really just find where the core of his heart is for people and for missions, and let's be a learner of that, and let's continue to grow and learn from those things. And then he continues on to say, then, that yoke is easy, the burden is light. And so, like we'd mentioned before, so many people, especially in my generation, are anxious and depressed and stuff like that. But, when you find that peace of God, it really does. When you find his heart for ministry, you can see how that yoke is easy, the burden is light. And so, let's get into investing. So how do we invest and how do we give opportunities to young people to grow in ministry and in missions? And so Ralph Winner, who's a famous missionary and just kind of spearheaded a lot of missions movements, he said, first they go over prepared, or second, they go with little preparation at all. Either situation places them and their ministries at a decided disadvantage. And so this is something that we're seeing just be a real struggle for youth in ministry and in missions, is you can go to college and you can get a 4-year degree, but it just takes, it takes time, it takes years. So you're older, maybe the passion that you once had has kind of gone down. One huge burden and barrier to going on to the missions field is, college debt and student loans. And so that's one major problem, is they can go with that preparation, but it's a disadvantage. There's a lot of things that have to be worked through, and a lot of people are like, well, I have this degree and I have this debt, and so I need to make money and I need to survive. I need to, eventually I'm going to want a house and kids and a family, and then and it's like you lose sight of the mission and of the ministry. And I think that debt has really just put a strain on a lot of young people's hearts. That they want to serve the Lord in all capacities, but really we're all broken people and just kind of want to come back to, first and foremost, to that comfort and be like, well, maybe after I pay off my debt, but at that point you might have a house. Well, then after I pay off the house, and then people never end up going, which is a real travesty. And then the flip side of that is, you can go when you're young, but you might not have the training to get into certain places. You might not have the education you need, or you might not know the culture or the language very well. And so a lot of people come home early from missions too that have gone over underprepared. And so that's another issue that is being battled. And so we have to kind of sacrifice to the Lord and give up our comfort on these things. We weren't called to live lives of comfort and peace for the sake of the gospel, but we are called to go out and not even to have a place to lay our heads or a place to call home. And so that's what we're called to do. And I think we shouldn't be shying away from that when expressing that to young people. I think young people, like we said in the beginning, I've scrolled down past the quote, but they are decided and they're adamant about their positions. And so we can kind of come to them and say, you might be giving up everything for the sake of the gospel. Is it worth it? And I think a lot of people, you'll be surprised and say, yes, it is. So I don't think we have to shy away from sharing the full gospel. Let's not sugarcoat the gospel or put on a lens that thinks it makes mission sound more appealing. Let's kind of tell it how it is. And I think that's something that's very important. And so I think also just being consistent in giving youth opportunities. So I was trying to think of a way to express this, and so I was thinking of, because we want to continually imprint on people, and then I was thinking, so I already told one story about my mom and her foot, so I'm going to tell another story, not about her foot or the car or driving manual. But it always seems, my mom has a knack for rearranging the furniture, making it look all nice, interior decorating, those sorts of things. And so, I'll be away for a weekend or for a month or on a trip or something like that, and I'll come home and the living room is in a totally different design. Or maybe there's even a new couch. And I'm like, oh man. And so I'm away on this weekend, so I might come home and it might be a completely different design again, and I wouldn't be surprised. But it's funny, so in the living room, on the carpet, you have the nubs or the bottom of the couch or sofa or love seat or whatever you have there, and it makes just an imprint on the carpet. And you can kind of tell how long the furniture has been there based on, the size of the imprint. You might ruffle your fingers over it and it might not go away too easily. And I think that is very similar to how we should be approaching discipling young people is we have to be persistent. You kind of have to you have to put in the time and the effort, and you have to imprint on them just opportunities and different things. And so we want to be those divots in the carpet that don't go away very easily. We want to be permanent, lasting change in their lives. And so next time you see a divot in the carpet, just think of a youth that you could be ministering to, and just how you can encourage them in ministry. So in Colossians 3:16, it says, "Let the message of Christ dwell among you, richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs of the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts." And so I just love that word in the beginning, dwell. And that's kind of what the carpet makes me think of, is we want Christ to be dwelling in their lives. And so we want it to be consistent. And we'll kind of get into that later when we talk about instilling. We've gone through investment, and we wanted to instill in them, that love of Christ, that passion for nations and for people. And so I just think that dwelling in Christ is such a beautiful image. And so I think, and not only are we impacting this generation, or the next generation beneath us, but I love it so much. It says in Psalm 78, 5 through 7, it says, "He commanded our ancestors to teach them, or to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they would turn and tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands." And so I think, we can't get caught up in thinking that we're just discipling one person, but it's amazing to just think the lasting impact. And so many times in the Bible it's mentioned, blessings, to the fourth and fifth generation. And so I think just the importance of investing in young people is, if you change that person's life, it's very, very likely that, that radical change will then lead to them investing in their kids and in their kids and, blessed to the fourth and fifth generation. And so this is lasting impact we're talking about. And that's why youth and young people is so, so important. They're very, they're adaptable, and they're, again, this generation that is very adamant and very, passionate about these things. This is going to take root in them, and it's going to be something that they will instill in future generations. And so this could change, not only this generation, but many generations to come. And so, so we only have a little bit of time left. I'll briefly touch on instill and just kind of some thoughts I had on that. And then also tomorrow, we'll be talking in London. And then me and Brian would love to share more about just, how does this become something that's permanent in young people's lives, and just how do you then get them to that state of independence where they're running their own ministries and they're taking initiative. And so we'll kind of talk about that more tomorrow, but today I can just briefly touch on it. So I think there's a system that it's another alliteration where it has the same letter within it. I didn't come up with this one. I kind of adapted it. So there's the 4 P's of pioneering a new church, but I think at least the first one would be pioneer, but then I think the next 3 really just show a beautiful heart for discipleship and just bringing up that the next generation. And so that first stage would be to parent. And so, that's exactly what it sounds like, is, you're kind of, raising them up from they're young, you're taking care of their spiritual needs, and you're, kind of feeding into them, and you're giving a lot in that season. And it's a season that's very tiring, probably very consuming. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine. I've heard stories. And so, that spiritual parenting. And then the next stage would be to partner. And, then, you guys are doing things together, you're kind of seen as equals. That's like an amazing stage of mentorship. They always say for mentorship, like, the mentor gets just as much out of it as the mentee. You know, there's so many things you learn from that experience. And so then to partner and to kind of be equals in that and kind of share responsibility is a great way to kind of ease into that growth and just, you know, their future just independence in ministry. And then finally is transitioning out. You know, you're becoming an empty nester, and you're in the participant page, or phase page. You're in the participant phase. And so this is where, you know, they've kind of developed their own passions. You know, they might have their own house church, or they might have their own community that they're discipling in. And then you are kind of just then responsible to speak in on certain things, or just to even participate in the things that they would love you to like join in on. And so you're kind of more just, just like a little like, you know, you're like the guest speaker. You know, you're no longer leading it anymore. So how do you transition out of that? And so we can also talk more about that tomorrow. And so, I believe my time is up here, but I think just one of the most important things is just to pray for this generation, and just pray for opportunities that we can look for to impact them and to instill in them. What an amazing opportunity that we have. And so, I just encourage you in that. And so,